I'd now like to welcome Professor Jack Winkler, former Professor of Nutrition Policy at London Metropolitan University, and I hopefully we didn't spoil your talk too much this morning, and there'll be lots of surprises.
A few mechanical bits first.
Excellent.
In the 18th century, champagne was a sweet liqueur. A standard bottle that size had 300 grams of sugar. In sugar density, that's almost 4 times Coca-Cola. Today, the brut version contains 10 grams of sugar. That's a reduction of 98%. Now you might say champagne isn't actually a product of public health significance. So, how about this one instead? Sugar puffs. When I did a survey in the early 1990s, the sweetest breakfast cereal on the market was this one, with 49 grams of sugar per 100 grams of product. In the 2011 survey done by Which, it contained 35 grams. That pack labels it as 31 grams. 31 grams of sugar is still a lot of sugar, but it's a 37% reduction. These are two very different products, but they've been following a common approach to reformulation called dehabituation. They've gradually reduced the sugar without adding sweeteners. Over time, they have reshaped consumer taste preferences to a lower level of sweetness. Graham McGregor is going to talk about this strategy in more detail in the next talk, but these two products prove that his approach can be successful. Go back a bit. Both these reductions have also taken a very long time. They've been done by a series of small incremental reductions separated by pauses, pre-tested so that the changes, the reductions, were not perceptible to the taste of established consumers. That indicates an important point. There is a time dimension to reformulation. We must balance the gradualness needed to bring consumers with us with the urgency needed to solve diet-related problems. And this is particularly important for sugar because, as we have heard repeatedly this morning, the rapid rise in diabetes in many parts of the world means that we need very prompt action. Neither product made claims about their reductions. They didn't say this is a healthy champagne. They didn't say this is sugar puff. They followed what I call the unobtrusive strategy. Incremental reductions, imperceptible to consumers' taste, invisible with no claims. And that is central to the success of a dehabituation strategy, which would also be applied to sugar. Let's understand how reformulation works. The product has to be acceptable to consumers in order for them to buy it, and in order for them to consume the nutritionally reformulated product. And it is that consumption which delivers the nutritional benefits to the consumers. Taste is central to that process. But the incremental strategy also has an unintended consequence. We do not know the extent of sugar reduction by reformulation that has been done or is underway now. We have other isolated examples beside these two, like Danone, Kellogg, General Mills, and many others. We even have some corporate policies for sugar reduction. The best example is Heinz, which began a sugar reduction program in 1986. Later, others followed, including the two biggies, Nestle and Unilever. But none of these companies have published comprehensive reports on what they have done, so we don't even know about the sugar reformulation of progressive companies, much less about the industry as a whole. Certainly there is more sugar reformulation being done than meets the eye, but no one knows how much, not even in the food industry, much less public health. So we do not know which products and sectors have been reformulated, by which means, to what extent. nor do we know which products and sectors have not been yet reformulated, and why not, and how much potential there is for sugar reduction by reformulation. We've just heard Wayne Morley talking about a second approach to reduction, namely technology. This approach is much less well known in the public health world because it's led by food technologists. But Leatherhead is not alone in this strategy. For example, the European Framework Programme 7 for Research includes 4 food technology projects focused on nutritional reformulation. All involve multiple research groups in several member states, plus corporate research units from industrial partners. There's a lot of it underway. With sugar, there is another option available for reformulation that is not common with either fat or salt: the use of a direct substitute ingredient, sweeteners. In the European Union, there are 19 approved sweeteners. 11 of them are intense, 8 of them are polyols. In theory, sweeteners offer several potential advantages. They enable larger reductions faster. They deal with oral health as well as obesity, because all of them are non-cardiogenic. They are all compatible with dehabituation as a strategy, because all you have to do is use less sweeteners. And, not irrelevant, most of them are cheaper than sugar. However, this audience will know better than most that sweeteners have been subject to a long-running controversy. So let me start by analysing that controversy. It is actually not a controversy about sweeteners, but it's about aspartame itself. Earlier concerns about saccharin, cyclamates, and sucralose have all now subsided. The focus today is solely on aspartame. But that opposition is extremely well organised in terms of advocacy groups, websites, and research. That controversy is going to continue. The concern about the potential health effects of aspartame first emerged 40 years ago. Since then, it has been repeatedly evaluated, approved in over 100 countries, jointly endorsed by the American Heart Association, the American Diabetic Association, and in the grandest assessment ever done by EFSA, published earlier this year, aspartame was again found safe for most users. But on the very same day, the opposition rejected the conclusion. Whatever you think about it, that indicates this controversy is going to run and run. Nonetheless, most consumers are not worried about sweeteners, aspartame or any other. Otherwise, the sales of products containing sweeteners would not be so high. The vast majority of soft drinks and chewing gums sold in the United Kingdom today contain sweeteners. Nonetheless, on this subject, many professionals in the public health field have remained silent. This is understandable. It shows they're human. Whatever position you take, for or against, someone's bound to criticize you, so it is prudent to keep silent. In the current context, however, that is no longer appropriate. Anyone involved in sugar reduction, whether in public health or in industry, should, I believe, take a public position on sweeteners, for or against. Doing so is just the beginning, however, not the end. If you decide against the use of sweeteners, you have to deal with the problem of how you're going to reduce sugar consumption on the scale required to deal with the diabetic epidemic about which we've heard so much this morning. If, on the other hand, you decide you approve of sweeteners, then you have to ask, why have these wonder ingredients been used only in 2 products that people consume? How and when are we going to apply them to all the other sweet foods? For what it's worth, this is what I think on the subject. On the scientific evidence currently available, the proven health risks of sugar vastly outweigh any potential health risks of sweeteners. That is not to say that sweeteners are healthy per se, or that we should stop monitoring their effects. But in the current context, for most people, there would be health benefits from replacing some of their sugars intake with sweeteners. How much difference would this make? In public debates, the choice is usually seen as an all or nothing one. Products either contain sugar or they contain sweeteners. In fact, many products currently on the market are in blends of sugar and sweeteners. Consider soft drinks, the largest source of sugar in the British diet. In the 1990s, when the pound was devalued, the price of sugar in Europe rose 19%. This led to an immediate surge in the use of sweeteners in soft drinks. Industry estimates at that time gauged that the sector was equally divided into thirds. 1/3 flavored sweetened only with sugar, 1/3 sweetened only with sweeteners, and 1/3 blend of sugar and sweeteners. That is to say, 20 years ago, 2/3 of the soft drinks in the United Kingdom already contained sweeteners. The equivalent estimates now are not available at present, but they may soon be. My guess is that since the 1990s, the share of blends has increased, and it will certainly increase in the years ahead because the new trendy natural sweetener, stevia, which Wayne mentioned, actually is always used in blends because of its aftertaste. Effectively, a blend strategy is a kind of analog to a semi-skim strategy. It's worked with milk and it could assist with sugars. Let me illustrate the point. Most of you will recognize this. It's not the sweetest product on the British market, but it's the best selling. It's sweetened entirely with sugar, and that can contains 35 grams. This is the Coca-Cola fully sweetened with sweeteners, 1 Coke Zero, and like its name implies, it contains 0 grams of sugar. It's sweetened with aspartame and acesulfame potassium, known to its friends as ACE-K. That's the first. That's the other end of the continuum. Fanta is Coca-Cola's brand name for its fruit-flavored drinks. They are combinations of aspartame and ACE-K with sugar, leading to a 34% reduction in the sugar content. A local British favourite, Tizer, combines sugar only with ACE-K, but it produces a 46% reduction in sugar. Lilt, another Coca-Cola brand, adds a third sweetener, saccharin, into the mix to produce a reduction of 57%. White's Lemonade, one of the major secondary brands, uses the same 3-sweetener mix and produces a reduction in the sugar content of 77%. And some sweeteners can make substantial reductions in popular sweet foods in their sugar content. And personally, I think savings of 34, 46, 57, and 77% in sugar content are worth having. Let me conclude by looking at reformulation as a strategy. We've been talking about 3 modes of sugar reformulation. They are not mutually exclusive. They can all be used together. The question is, why are we here talking about reformulation today? There are 2 reasons. The first is that 75 to 85% of the UK diet is made of processed products. Their nutritional quality shapes the nutritional status of the nation. They should be an object of concern, whatever other strategies we use. But there's also the issue that our existing approaches are not working very well. There have been 3 recent surveys of nutrition policies around the world. They all come to the same conclusion. Everywhere, including the United Kingdom, has overwhelmingly used education for consumers as its principal nutrition policy. It involves exhortation to people to choose different foods, information to aid in the choosing. That strategy has failed. Everywhere, in poor countries and in rich, people grow fatter and fatter. and sugar intakes remain high. It is against that background that a new strategy has emerged. In addition to urging people to choose healthier foods, you can start from the foods they actually eat now, then improve their nutrient profiles. That's reformulation. It implies a very big strategic shift. Change foods as well as trying to change people. Reformulation is not the only strategy, and no one is suggesting that it is. However, if widely practiced by the food industry, in any or all of the forms that are being described in this session, then it has advantages. There is no need for people, consumers, to go out seeking out healthy products every time they go into a shop. It benefits everyone, not just the health aware, not just the educated who know about healthy foods, not just the affluent who can afford to buy them. It also copes with a problem that many people in public health are very reluctant to admit. Many people are not interested in healthy eating. Some are even repelled by it. Luciana Berger has been going on about the reaction to the nanny state. The Labour Party knows about that section of the population. But food manufacturers do recognise the problem. That's why so many of them have been proceeding unobtrusively. Against that background, for most consumers, the key advantage of reformulation is that they do not have to give up the foods they like. They can eat nutritionally improved versions, and therefore you get nutrition improvement without dietary change. And that is why, whatever else we do to reduce sugar, reformulation is the most practical way forward.
Thank you very much.